Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today we're going to talk about what I read in April. I'm a bit of a small reader, so I only put 4 books away this month. That's actually a pretty good number for me. So yeah, I just want to remind you that no matter how many books you read every month, as long as you're reading and it makes you happy, then that's all that really matters. So if you are also a small reader, or even if it takes you months to finish just one book, as long as it's making you happy to read that book, don't let the numbers bother you. Okay, let's move on. So the first book I read in April was That's Not What Happened by Kody Keplinger. And this book very loosely follows the Cassie Bernall martyrdom from the Columbine shooting. So if you don't know that story, this kind of mirrors that. So basically there's a school shooting, and one of the girls that is shot, her name is Sarah, and somehow it gets to the press that Sarah was proclaiming her faith in God, and that was the reason that she was killed by the gunman. And it all just kind of like snowballed from there, and she became a martyr for her faith. And her best friend Lynn was actually with her, and she knows that's not really how anything happened, but she stayed quiet because she was also dealing with her own trauma from surviving the school shooting and all of these things. But at some point, I think it's like the 10-year anniversary, Sarah's parents decide, we're going to write a book because, you know, I don't know, they feel like they need to write a book. And Lynn finally says, you know, enough is enough. I'm going to come clean about the truth. I'm going to say what really happened. And so this book is kind of a compilation of her survivor story, and you get all the other survivors in there too, because as we get further into book, Lynn starts to realize that the other survivor stories were also kind of magnified to the point where they weren't true. Like, the media had spun their stories in a way that a lot of what happened to them in their survivorship wasn't actually the truth of what happened to them. I really liked this book, but part of the reason I wanted to read it is because I'm continuously interested in the Columbine shooting. I read a book about Columbine, and it's just called Columbine, and now I can't remember who wrote it, but I'll drop the title down below. I read that book, and it's really well put together. It's amazing. And then I saw this as a fictional, retelling of the Cassie Bernall story, and I immediately added it to my TBR. I mean, that was probably a little while ago, but I finally managed to read it, and I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5. It has some really great representation in it. So yeah, if you like reading about school shootings and things like that, it's kind of a weird genre, but this is definitely not the first school shooting book that I've read. I thought this one was very well done. Okay, the next book that I read was Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson, and it stars Mary, who is accused and serves time for killing a baby. The only thing is, Mary at the time was 9 years old when she allegedly killed this baby. So she went into a very special prison system designed for young children. It's a very heavy hitting book. Lots of trauma, lots of darkness, lots of sadness. If you have not read Tiffany D. Jackson, I highly recommend you reading some of her books. She is just an amazing writer. Now, let's put what I just said aside, because the last 5 pages of this book made me so incredibly angry. And I'm starting to think that I just don't like Jackson's writing style, because in another one of her books that I read last year, I got to the final pages, and she just completely left the story unfinished. Open, everything was still all up in the air, and I remember thinking, is she setting it up for a sequel? Why did she leave it open so much? Why didn't she finish the storyline? And no, she didn't set it up for a sequel. There is not going to be a sequel. That is, in all actuality, that is how she ended the book. And I felt the exact same way with this book. Let's not even talk about the major plot twist at the end of the book. We're not even going to talk about it. Ever. But she left the whole storyline completely open. Like, there were so many things that were unresolved. We didn't get any kind of closure with the storyline. I just remember thinking, I can't believe, really, that the story was not going to be wrapped up. And after reading some of the reviews for this book and for the other book that I read, a lot of people are in agreement that this is just how she writes, because a lot of her other books follow similar lines. Her character development is amazing. The way she chooses to write is amazing. The topics that she chooses are just so hard-hitting and raw and real, and I love it when I'm reading her books. I love the books because it's so important and so magnetic and wonderful, and you just want to keep ripping the pages away because the pacing is also so good. And then when you get to the end, you feel like she let you down because she didn't finish the book. I don't know. That's just me. That's my opinion. I still really liked this book enough to give it a 3 out of 5 rating. But honestly, like, if she had just tacked on maybe like 20 more pages and just finished the storyline, it easily been a 5 out of 5 for me, because her writing is just so good. Her writing is just so good. So this book was very interesting. The mother-daughter relationship, the socioeconomic issues of dealing with a very young black girl murdering a white baby. I mean, basically the headlines write themselves, you know, and before she even got into that courtroom, the media and society had hung her. It was a very hard-hitting novel, and I'm so disappointed in the ending. I'm not gonna give up on Tiffany Jackson. Like, I'm not. I'm gonna give another one of her books a go because I just really love her writing style. But if she lets me down again, I might have to walk away from this relationship. So, yeah, that's allegedly. So the next book I read was, do you see my cat over there? It's like messing with my stuff. Sorry. The next book I read was Final Girls by Riley Sager, and I actually did a comparison review of Final Girls with the Final Girl support group on my channel, so I'll put a link down for that in the description section. Final Girls follows Quincy years after her massacre at Pine Cottage, and she was the only survivor. And so at the beginning of the book, one of the other Final Girls, there's 3, one of the other Final Girls is found dead in her house under suspicious circumstances, and the novel kind of kicks off from there. Quincy actually cannot remember what happened to her during her massacre. She has completely blanked it out, repressed it, and so she's struggling to move on in her life. Like, she puts on this facade that she's really okay, but she's really not, and I think it's because her trauma was never properly dealt with, because she really can't remember. I really enjoyed this book. It had a really great pace. The whole time we're jumping back and forth between like what's happening now as Quincy is afraid that she's in danger, and she meets the other Final Girl, Sam, and they've kind of bonded, and Quincy starts to realize that her trauma is completely unresolved and she's really not doing that okay. And we're jumping back to her night at Pine Cottage as she's trying to remember bits and pieces of what's happened, and she's finally getting to relive what actually happened that night. I think the pace was great. Riley Sager does a really great job with characters, does a really great job with just the fine knife edge of thriller. Like, there are some moments where he really could have gone full gore and he didn't, but the line that he towed was so good that you didn't need it to be super gory. Like, it gave you just enough to make you completely satisfied. I really enjoyed this book. If you haven't read anything by Riley Sager, honestly, if you like thrillers, horror, that kind of genre, definitely pick up one of his books. I guarantee you'll be happy with something. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. The last book I read is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson, and this book completely blew me away. Oh my gosh. I will never not recommend this book. It was just fantastic. So we follow Liz, who lives in a very small Midwestern town, and she happens to be like maybe one of 5 black people that live in the town, and she's also on the poorer side, while this town is very elitist. And she's trying to get a scholarship to go to school, and she finds out that her scholarship at the last minute has fallen through. And so in order for her to go to her dream school and get out of this situation that she's living in this town that she really doesn't love, she decides to run for prom queen, because if you win prom queen, you win like a scholarship, and the scholarship would be enough for her to go to her dream school. But unfortunately, Liz is not very popular, and she does not really fit. She doesn't feel like she fits in with anybody at her school. So it's kind of an uphill battle for Liz to win this scholarship, and she knows that. And so this book focuses on Liz trying to achieve her dreams by trying to win prom queen. And it's a very much a coming of age, finding yourself story, because Liz has to make decisions. You know, do I pretend to be this person in order to win, or do I actually be myself? The representation in this book is great. The storyline is so beautiful, and there's this nice little YA romance in there that's just so heart-touching, and this book just delivered. Like, wow, I was just shocked. And now I know why so many people have been like buzzing about this book. Like, I completely get it now, because it was really, really great. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 because I had no issues with this book. It flew by. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. The representation was perfect. It was a book I didn't know I wanted to read. Like, it was on my list because it was just on my list because I regularly try to diversify my bookshelf, and this book had been recommended to me, you know, everywhere. Everyone's talking about this book, and now I know why, because it's honestly a really great book. So if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend you read it. It was just perfect. If you want more in-depth, like clean perspective, you know, not just my jumbled thoughts, I will drop my blog post link down below, and you can read my blog post. I also got some really exciting news the other day. An author that I regularly work with just published a new book. I'll put it here. It's called Queens of the Mascara, and it's about the final 2 queens of the Amazon warriors. And I'm gonna do a whole segment after I read this book, because I've reviewed a bunch of books by Hannah Lynn in the past. Like, usually when she does a release, she contacts me, and, you know, I write a blog post, I do a review, and all that other stuff. So I've read a couple of her books, and I'm happy to talk to you guys about them. So I have her slotted to read this book in June, because June is after May. But she just released this book on May 1st, so it is available if you want to read it. I really do recommend any of her books, but this one is part of her Grecian Women, I'm sorry. This one is part of her Grecian Women series, and I've read Athena's Child, very good. I didn't read Spartan's Arrow. I missed the release for that one, but I am going to add it to my to be read. So I'll be reading Queens of the Mascara in June, and I'll do a whole segment on it, but I was so excited that I wanted to tell you guys now. So if you want to read it, it's already out. You can find it on Amazon, and it's actually free on Kindle Unlimited right now, so go read it. That's all I really have for you today. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you. Bye.